series for 2 Sundays on the topic of contentment. When we finish this series, we'll start the 1st of November, the next series called Road Trip. It's a metaphor for your journey with Christ. We'll talk about preparation and departure. We'll talk about the travel, the journey. We'll talk about the arrival at the destination in 4 weeks. When we finish that, we're right into December, where we will start our December series, our Christmas series entitled Christmas Revolution. And what that is going, the heart of Christmas Revolution is just these words: buy less, give more. We're just going to try to take that whole Christmas thing and flip it on its head so that we are focused more about what the purpose and the reason is for Christmas than anything else. And we'll talk with you in depth about that. 2 dates to remind you of, put on your calendar. November 20th, that's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, will be a Thanksgiving worship night that prepares us for the Thanksgiving holiday. And then the 24th, Christmas Eve, and it is a Monday, following the Sunday morning services, we will have a Christmas Eve service or 2, and we'll talk to you more about that. They'll be very simple services because we don't want to complicate the lives of our volunteers with a lot to do on Christmas Eve. In other words, we don't want Christmas Eve services to consume our volunteers when they want to have time with their families. So we'll do something really big on the 23rd, and then we'll do something really simple on the 24th. But a special time for us to be together, again, preparing us for Christmas Day. All right, so those are out there in front of you. Let's get started on this. Contentment. A lot of the things that I share with you, if not most of the things that I bring to you, begin with a personal experience in my life. And one of the reasons that I utilize personal experiences is because it helps me be passionate about what I'm sharing with you. That I'm not just sharing with you facts and figures and information. That I'm talking with you about something that in many cases, if not most cases, I have already lived out, walked out, or experienced in my life. And so this topic of contentment is something that God started in me a long time ago. In fact, and I'll get more into details, it started in me prior to the launch of Reality Church in March of 2013. It's what God initiated in me that prepared me for what I would be doing as far as His will, plan, and purpose for my life is concerned. Now, our theme verses for these 2 weeks come from Philippians chapter 4. When Paul, writing to the believers in Philippi, said these words: I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content. And in your mind, just underline, highlight that statement. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. Now, when I read that last statement, this was the question that rolled over in me. What is the all this Paul's referring to? Paul's saying, I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. And maybe another question to ask is, what is your all this? What is the all this that you are confronted with or challenged with today? Maybe it's in your health. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's your money. Maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's your job environment. What is the all this that's in front of you today that you're dealing with right now, this very minute? Well, Paul would offer to us some information about his all this. And in just a moment, we're going to read not an exhaustive list, but a very lengthy list of Paul's all this. And we're not going to do it so that we can make a comparison between our all this and his all this, but we're going to do this because it will uniquely qualify him to make the statement that he made to the Philippian church: I can do all this. All this what? Well, we have to turn over to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, where he gives us his list. And here it is. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. I could stop right there for me. 5 times, and that's 195 lashes. And you know they were not applied delicately. They were applied with veracity, with anger, with malice, with force. 5 times, he said. Well, if that's not enough, 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. Any of you guys remember ever being in a rock fight when you were a kid? If you were, how many of you guys were in a rock fight? How many of you got hit with a rock? Oh yeah, didn't feel very good, did it? No. Paul said I was pelted with stones. Gene thinks that's what is wrong with me now. I got hit in the head with rocks too many times. Okay, 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. Never rest, never peace, constantly on the move. He explains that. I've been in danger from rivers, from bandits, from my fellow Jews, from Gentiles. I've been in danger in the city, in the country, at sea, from false believers. I have labored and toiled and gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. So in every aspect of his person, physically, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, Paul said, I can do all this through him who strengthens me. Would you agree that uniquely qualifies him to make that statement and to encourage us that whatever our all this is, we can get through it, not in our own strength and our own capacity, our own abilities. We can get through it through him who gives us the strength to get through it. Paul said, I've been through a lot. And he said, I have learned the secret of being content. One of the things that he's saying to us in that statement is that contentment is an acquired skill. It is not something that comes naturally to us. In fact, what comes naturally to us is the diametrical opposite. We are naturally discontented people, not contented people. That's our nature. So learning the secret of contentment is a process that is an acquired skill. And learning contentment is a process that God initiates in us. God starts this process. Now, the best way for me to explain that to you is, as I initially said, from my own personal experiences. And for some of you, this is going to be repetitive. You've already heard me tell this story. For others, it will be fresh and new to you. And for some, a little more detail than you've heard before. This church started March the 6th, 2013. But about a year or more before this church was ever even a thought, a passing thought in my mind, I had a very unique dream. And you know that I am very often using the term or the phrase, God doesn't do random, right? But at the time, I will admit that I considered that to be a random dream. It really had no impact or no meaning for me at the time. And the dream was a simple one. I dreamed that I was in a building. There were people that were there. I knew that it was a church. I knew that I was the pastor. I didn't recognize a single person that was there because that was unimportant. What was happening was that on the stage was one guy leading worship with an acoustic guitar. And the only thing God said to me in that dream was one word: simplicity. Now, as I said to you, at the time, that dream just had no real meaning for me. I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew better than to discard it, so I did what I call just put it in a box and put it on the shelf, because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know that a little over a year later, that dream would suddenly have significant meaning to me, because I would realize that with that dream, God had initiated a process in me that would enable me to learn the secret of being content. Now, if God ever speaks to you a simple word, please know that there is more in that than just that word, and it's up to you to unpack it. When I was just a young guy in ministry, I asked God about His will for my life, looking for information, wanting to have some kind of confidence and assurance about my future, and God's response to me was a simple one. He said, "Son, all you need to know about my will for your life is this: you have a destiny and you have an adversary." And that's all He said. And I realized there's more in that message. I need to unpack it. So when I unpack destiny, here's what I pulled out of that box. God has a plan. God has a purpose. God has a position. God makes provision, and He provides protection. All of that comes unpacked out of that word destiny. So when God said simplicity to me, I knew there was more to unpack from that word. I just didn't know when to unpack it. March the 6th of 2013, Reality Church launched in my living room. We would eventually move to James and Gloria Roberts' home, because they had a much bigger facility in their home, a space in their home for us to be able to use. I said to them at one point that we have main floor seating, and then we have a mezzanine, and we have balcony seating. Because they had, really, it was like we were on this floor, and 2 steps up was the kitchen, and then there was a balcony around it. So we had a very cool venue for church. But here's what happened. And here's where I began to see that dream take on substance and structure. If you have been with us any length of time, or were there near the beginning, or came in not long after, you know that for a long period of time, here's what we had for worship. One guy with an acoustic guitar leading worship. Now, what's the significance of that for me? Because it was in the dream? No. The significance was this: God knew Rick Edgar better than I know myself. God knew that I love worship. And I love worship, the bigger, the louder, the better. That's how I feel about worship. So for me to be content with the simplicity of one guy standing right here with an acoustic guitar leading worship was a process God had to initiate in me over a year before, so that I would be ready and willing to allow God to fashion Reality Church according to His plan and His purpose, and not based on my own preconceived ideas about how we're supposed to do church. And I promise you that I have never done church in my life the way we do church here. There are so many things that happen in this place that never happened with me before. Here's what else I discovered about myself as I considered what God was doing in me. And this is an honest confession and admission. You see, I believe that God knew that He couldn't trust me with the vision until He leveled the playing field in my heart. What does leveling the playing field mean? It means, again, that he could fashion this church the way he wanted it. And it wouldn't be me anxiously running out in front of him to try to make or force things to happen. Because I promise you, if God had not started that process in me, I don't know if I could have made it through that time of one guy with an acoustic guitar leading worship. Because what we have this morning, that's what I like. Now, just because I knew that God had calmed Rick down and had helped me to find contentment with one guy, and we did. Chris Butler led worship for us. A humorous part of that experience is the first time Chris would lead worship, I thought Chris played acoustic guitar. I knew he had one. Chris was a keyboard player, much accomplished. For some reason, I thought he played acoustic guitar as well. So the first night Chris would lead worship, I said, Chris, next Saturday, I want you to lead worship, and I want you to do 2 songs with your acoustic guitar. And he said, okay. I didn't know I had just put him in panic mode. I would find out later from his wife, Heather, that he spent the next week locked in his room learning 2 songs with his acoustic guitar, thanking God and hoping that I wouldn't ask him to do anything else. He got there that night. I still don't know what's going on. I said, Chris, here's what I want you to do, buddy. I want you to lead 2 songs and I want you to pray. He said, no. I said, no what? He said, I ain't praying. I said, okay. Lead 2 songs and I'll pray. Chris was a novice. This was the first time he was doing this. But I will tell you that from that time, those of you who got to see it, Chris Butler matured and grew into one of the finest worship leaders you'll ever meet. And in fact, if you ever got to see Chris at United Church in Delaware, when he was there leading worship on that stage, you saw a guy that learned how to lead worship right here on this stage. Speaking of this, even though I knew God said, be content with one guy with an acoustic guitar, didn't mean I couldn't have a full worship team. See, don't think I'm in disobedience here. Don't start judging. When we were remodeling this building, which for those of you who don't know, when we got it, it was just a shell. Everything in here is what we've done. And Gene was leading the remodeling, and he called me and said, okay, we're getting ready to put the stage in. He said, what size stage you want? I said, Gene, I want it from one wall to the other. He was like, we ain't got nobody but Chris. But he knew my heart. He knew it was okay for me to say, let's plan, because just because I have to be content with this doesn't mean I have to give up on the dream or give up on the vision or let go of the hope. I'm not going to complain about what we have while we wait for what God has planned. Why is this lesson? Why is this process of learning to be content so critical for us? It's because learning to be content is essential movement in our lives. You see, we're moving from anxiety to hope. We are moving from anger to peace. We are moving from frustration to total, complete, absolute trust in God. It's essential for us to make those moves. So let me look at the other side of this coin. What happens if we don't learn this lesson? Well, we live in the antithesis, if you will, of contentment, which I will simply say is discontentment. What does discontentment look like? Discontentment is living in a constant state of unhappiness. I'm unhappy with possessions. I'm unhappy with position. I'm unhappy with my current situation. In fact, this is a commonly used phrase among those who are living in discontentment, and you can fill in the blank or put anything in there you like. Everyone's blank is better than mine. Everyone's job is better than mine. Everyone's house, everyone's car, everyone's marriage, everybody's kids are better than mine. Not happy with anything at any point, at any time. And here's the dangerous thing about that attitude. God takes it personally. It's a direct affront to Him if we are discontented to the point that nothing we have pleases us. He takes it personally. How seriously does He take it? Okay, I'm going to read some verses to you. I don't want you to turn there. Just, you'll see them on the screen. It's from the book of Jude, because we're going to have a little bit of fun with this in a lesson. Jude chapter 1. There's only one. Okay, Jude 14 and 15. Behold, the Lord came to execute judgment on all, to convict all the ungodly of all their undeeds of ungodliness, which they have committed in such an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against Him. So the Lord came to execute judgment and to convict all the ungodly for their ungodly deeds done in ungodliness. So my question is, because the next verse will start this way, these are, who would you put in that blank? Ungodly people doing ungodly things in ungodly ways. I mean, I would probably say, how about murderers? How about rapists? How about abusers? How about robbers and thieves and liars and adulterers and fornicators and all of those things that come in that list of the works of the flesh? I mean, I probably would fill up that blank with that kind of a list. Ungodly sinners doing ungodly things in ungodly ways, and God came to execute judgment. Uh-oh. Here's what it says. These are grumblers, malcontents, following their own passions, loudmouth boasters, flattering people to gain advantage. That's an interesting couple of names there. Not murderers and rapists and robbers and thieves. No, grumblers and malcontents. What's a grumbler? Well, I went to Merriam-Webster to ask. A grumbler is someone who mutters in discontent, always complaining under their breath. Things are never good enough. Things are never going right for them. Everybody else's is better than theirs. Muttering constantly in discontent. What is a malcontent? A malcontent is one who bears a grudge from a sense of grievance or thwarted ambition. They're not saying everybody's blank is better than mine. Here's what malcontents are saying. I deserve better than what God's given me. Really? You deserve better? The true phrase should say, God has given me better than I deserve. But not to the malcontent. They have a sense of grievance. They feel like that they've been wronged in some way, and they are angry complainers about their situations or circumstances. And God takes it personally. And if we don't learn the lesson of being content, if we don't learn the secret of being content, and we fall into the category of the grumbler or the malcontent, then we have positioned ourselves in a place of jeopardy as far as our relationship with God is concerned, because we are affronting His sufficiency. You see, learning the secret of being content gave to me and gives to all of us the capacity to wait, and to wait for God's best. I have repeated that phrase time and time again to people in this ministry and outside of it. If there's anything I have learned in this process, I have learned waiting for God's best. Not running out in front of Him, trying to force something or make it happen, but waiting for God's best. We can do that when we learn the secret of being content. Paul was writing to a young pastor named Timothy, and he was talking about this very subject. One of the reasons that people feel they have a grievance against God because of their situation, circumstances, or whatever is happening, that they feel they deserve better. One of the reasons they feel they deserve better is because they are doing their best to live a life that pleases Him. Lord, I'm doing everything I know to do that is right. I quote Psalm 19 all the time, Lord, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer, so that what I say and what I think and how I conduct my life is pleasing to you. Because in some distorted sense, we believe that if we do that, we deserve or have earned something from God. And when we don't get it, when we think we should get it, and how we think we should get it, then God is not treating us fairly. We have been unjustly thwarted in our ambition, and now we harbor a grievance against God. So Paul says these words to this young pastor. Godliness actually is a source of great gain. That sounds good, doesn't it? But then he adds this to the equation. When accompanied by contentment. Okay, that tells me that there are two things I need to do. I need to, and it is incumbent upon me to do my best to live a life that's pleasing and acceptable to God while I wait for His best. And I don't harbor grievance against Him when it doesn't happen when, where, and how I, in my own preconceived notions, think that it should. The Amplified Version expands on that just a little bit. Godliness actually is a source of great gain when accompanied by contentment. What contentment? That contentment which comes from a sense of inner confidence based on the sufficiency of God. An inner confidence based on the sufficiency of God. In other words, in my own paraphrased version, I live my life that is pleasing and acceptable to God while I patiently wait for His best that I am certain will come because I trust in His sufficiency. That's why grumblers and malcontents are an affront to God, because we are making a statement that just the opposite is true. when I am discontented, I am communicating to God that I don't have confidence in His sufficiency. And He's offended by that. Do you remember that Paul declared at certain places and times that he was given a thorn in the flesh that buffeted him? A lot of speculation about what that thorn in the flesh was. I mean, some people have speculated it was physical, that it was poor eyesight. Others have said he suffered from migraine headaches or some other physical malady that at times encumbered him. People have speculated that it was horrible memories of how he had persecuted the church, especially what he had done to Stephen. As the Word of God says, Stephen held the coats of those men who stoned him to death. And I've often speculated that I think Paul woke up at many times before his conversion with that image playing over in his mind of Stephen's body being pelted with stones while he said, Father, lay not this sin to their charge. Was it memories? Was it a physical problem? Whatever it was, Paul struggled with it mightily, so much that he said, there are 3 specific times I asked God, take this from me, please. And all 3 times the answer that God gave him was this. Say it with me. My grace is sufficient. Guys, one of the ways that we're able to stiff-arm discontentment in our lives, to hold it off, to have the peace and the confidence that we need, is to be certain of God's sufficient grace. The sufficient grace that'll get you through your all this that you're faced with today. And let me close by giving you a very simple formula or a mathematical equation. If we want to experience all that God has for us, and I don't know about you, but that's me. This is not the ending of Reality Church. We're still in the beginning of God's plan and purpose and vision unfolding. And I, for one, want to experience everything that He's planned. And I will not allow discontentment to be the stumbling block that will keep us from accomplishing His plan. What about you? Here's the equation. Here's the formula. Godliness plus contentment. One without the other will not get you there. Godliness and complaining, or contentment without living the life that's pleasing to Him. Either one disqualifies us. Godliness plus contentment equals God's perfect will accomplished. Next week, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about learning the secret. What was the secret that Paul learned? The secret of contentment. Something that would enable him to look back on his own life and even ahead at the persecutions that would come and say, I'm able to do all these things. I'm able to do all of this through Him who gives me strength. We'll talk about that next week. But this morning, I want to pray for you guys that are here. I want to pray for you for your all this, whatever it is. I want you to stand with me for just a moment. And we're going to pray a prayer of agreement. You know what your all this is. Matthew 18:19 says that if 2 of you agree on earth as touching any one thing, it shall be done for them of my Father in heaven.